This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, January 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 31. Renee de Lestrade to Louise de Maucombe. It is nearly 5 months now since baby was born, and not once, dear heart, have I found a single moment for writing to you. When you are a mother yourself, you will be more ready to excuse me than you are now, for you have punished me a little bit in making your own letters so few and far between. Do write, my darling. Tell me of your pleasures. Lay on the blue as brightly as you please. It will not hurt me, for I am happy now, happier than you can imagine. I went in state to the parish church to hear the Mass for recovery from childbirth, as is the custom in the old families of Provence. I was supported on either side by the two grandfathers, Louis's father and my own. Never had I knelt before God with such a flood of gratitude in my heart. I have so much to tell you of, so many feelings to describe, that I don't know where to begin. But from amidst these confused memories one rises distinctly, that of my prayer in the church. When I found myself transformed into a joyful mother, on the very spot where, as a girl, I had trembled for my future, it seemed to my fancy that the Virgin on the altar bowed her head and pointed to the infant Christ, who smiled at me. My heart full of pure and heavenly love, I held out little Armand for the priest to bless and bathe, in anticipation of the regular baptism to come later. But you will see us together then, Armand and me. My child, come see how readily the word comes, and indeed there is none sweeter to a mother's heart and mind or on her lips. Well then, dear child, during the last 2 months, I used to drag myself wearily and heavily about the gardens, not realizing yet how precious was the burden, spite of all the discomforts it brought. I was haunted by forebodings so gloomy and ghastly that they got the better even of curiosity. In vain did I picture the delights of motherhood. My heart made no response even to the thought of the little one who announced himself by lively kicking. That is a sensation, dear, which may be welcome when it is familiar, but as a novelty it is more strange than pleasing. I speak for myself at least. You know I would never affect anything I did not really feel, and I look on my child as a gift straight from heaven. For one who saw in it rather the image of the man she loved, it might be different. But enough of such sad thoughts, gone, I trust, forever. When the crisis came, I summoned all my powers of resistance, and braced myself so well for suffering, that I bore the horrible agony, so they tell me, quite marvellously. For about an hour I sank into a sort of stupor, of the nature of a dream. I seemed to myself then two beings, an outer covering racked and tortured by red-hot pincers, and a soul at peace. In this strange state, the pain formed itself into a sort of halo hovering over me. A gigantic rose seemed to spring out of my head, and grow ever larger and larger, till it enfolded me in its blood-red petals. The same color dyed the air around, and everything I saw was blood-red. At last the climax came, when soul and body seemed no longer able to hold together. The spasms of pain gripped me like death itself. I screamed aloud, and found fresh strength against this fresh torture. Suddenly this concert of hideous cries was overborne by a joyful sound, the shrill wail of the new-born infant. No words can describe that moment. It was as though the universe took part in my cries, when all at once the chorus of pain fell hushed before the child's feeble note. They laid me back again in the large bed, and it felt like paradise to me, even in my extreme exhaustion. 3 or 4 happy faces pointed through tears to the child. "My dear," I exclaimed in terror, "it's just like a little monkey! Are you really and truly certain it is a child?" I fell back on my side, miserably disappointed at my first experience of motherly feeling. "Don't worry, dear," said my mother, who had installed herself as nurse. "Why, you've got the finest baby in the world. You mustn't excite yourself, but give your whole mind now to turning yourself as much as possible into an animal, a milch cow, pasturing in the meadow. I fell asleep then, fully resolved to let nature have her way. Ah, my sweet, how heavenly it was to waken up from all the pain and haziness of the first days, when everything was still dim, uncomfortable, confused. A ray of light pierced the darkness. My heart and soul, my inner self, a self I had never known before, rent the envelope of gloomy suffering, as a flower bursts its sheath at the first warm kiss of the sun, at the moment when the little wretch fastened on my breast and sucked. Not even the sensation of the child's first cry was so exquisite as this. This is the dawn of motherhood. This is the fiat lux. Here is happiness, joy ineffable, though it comes not without pangs. O my sweet jealous soul, how you will relish a delight which exists only for ourselves, the child, and God! For this tiny creature, all knowledge is summed up in its mother's breast. This is the one bright spot in its world, towards which its puny strength goes forth. Its thoughts cluster round this spring of life, which it leaves only to sleep, and whither it returns on waking. Its lips have a sweetness beyond words, and their pressure is at once a pain and a delight which by every excess becomes pain, or a pain which culminates in delight. The sensation which arises from it, and which penetrates to the very core of my life, baffles all description. It seems a sort of centre whence a myriad joy-bearing rays gladden the heart and soul. To bear a child is nothing; to nourish it is birth renewed every hour. Oh, Louise, there is no caress of lover with half the power of those little pink hands, as they stray about, seeking whereby to lay hold on life. And the infant glances, now turned upon the breast, now raised to meet our own. What dreams come to us as we watch the clinging nursling! All our powers, whether of mind or body, are at its service. For it we breathe and think. In it our longings are more than satisfied. The sweet sensation of warmth at the heart, which the sound of his first cry brought to me, like the first ray of sunshine on the earth, came again as I felt the milk flow into his mouth, again as his eyes met mine, and at this moment I have felt it once more, as his first smile gave token of a mind working within. For he has laughed, my dear, a laugh, a glance, a bite, a cry, 4 miracles of gladness which go straight to the heart, and strike chords that respond to no other touch. A child is tied to our heartstrings, as the spheres are linked to their Creator. We cannot think of God except as a mother's heart writ large. It is only in the act of nursing that a woman realizes her motherhood in visible and tangible fashion. It is a joy of every moment. The milk becomes flesh before our eyes. It blossoms into the tips of those delicate flower-like fingers. It expands in tender, transparent nails. It spins the silky tresses. It kicks in the little feet. Oh, those baby feet, how plainly they talk to us! In them the child finds its first language. Yes, Louise, nursing is a miracle of transformation going on before one's bewildered eyes. Those cries, they go to your heart and not your ears. Those smiling eyes and lips, those plunging feet, they speak in words which could not be plainer if God traced them before you in letters of fire. What else is there in the world to care about? The father? Why, you could kill him if he dreamed of waking the baby. Just as the child is the world to us, so do we stand alone in the world for the child. The sweet consciousness of a common life is ample recompense for all the trouble and suffering, for suffering there is. Heaven save you, Louise, from ever knowing the maddening agony of a wound which gapes afresh with every pressure of rosy lips, and is so hard to heal, the heaviest tax perhaps imposed on beauty. For know, Louise, and beware, it visits only on a fair and delicate skin. My little ape has in 5 months developed into the prettiest darling that ever mother bathed in tears of joy, washed, brushed, combed, and made smart. For God knows what unwearied care we lavish upon those tender blossoms. So my monkey has ceased to exist, and behold in his stead a baby, as my English nurse says, a regular pink and white baby. He cries very little too now, for he is conscious of the love bestowed on him. Indeed, I hardly ever leave him, and I strive to wrap him round in the atmosphere of my love. Dear, I have a feeling now for Louis which is not love, but which ought to be the crown of a woman's love where it exists. Nay, I am not sure whether this tender fondness, this unselfish gratitude, is not superior to love. From all that you have told me of it, dear pet, I gather that love has something terribly earthly about it, whilst a strain of holy piety purifies the affection a happy mother feels for the author of her far-reaching and enduring joys. A mother's happiness is like a beacon, lighting up the future, but reflected also on the past in the guise of fond memories. The old Lestrade and his son have moreover redoubled their devotion to me. I am like a new person to them. Every time they see me and speak to me, it is with a fresh holiday joy which touches me deeply. The grandfather has, I verily believe, turned child again. He looks at me admiringly, and the first time I came down to lunch he was moved to tears to see me eating and suckling the child. The moisture in these dry old eyes, generally expressive only of avarice, was a wonderful comfort to me. I felt that the good soul entered into my joy. As for Louis, he would shout aloud to the trees and stones of the highway that he has a son, and he spends whole hours watching your sleeping godson. He does not know, he says, when he will grow used to it. These extravagant expressions of delight show me how great must have been their fears beforehand. Louis has confided in me that he had believed himself condemned to be childless. Poor fellow! He has all at once developed very much, and he works even harder than he did. The father in him has quickened his ambition. For myself, dear soul, I grow happier and happier every moment. Each hour creates a fresh tie between the mother and her infant. The very nature of my feelings proves to me that they are normal, permanent, and indestructible, whereas I shrewdly suspect love, for instance, of being intermittent. Certainly it is not the same at all moments. The flowers which it weaves into the web of life are not all of equal brightness. Love, in short, can and must decline, but a mother's love has no ebb tide to fear. Rather it grows with the growth of the child's needs, and strengthens with its strength. Is it not at once a passion, a natural craving, a feeling, a duty, a necessity, a joy? Yes, darling, here is woman's true sphere. Here the passion for self-sacrifice can expend itself, and no jealousy intrudes. Here, too, is perhaps the single point on which society and nature are at one. Society, in this matter, enforces the dictates of nature, strengthening the maternal instinct by adding to it family spirit and the desire of perpetuating a name, a race, an estate. How tenderly must not a woman cherish the child who has been the first to open up to her these joys, the first to call forth the energies of her nature, and to instruct her in the grand art of motherhood. The right of the eldest, which in the earliest times formed a part of the natural order and was lost in the origins of society, ought never, in my opinion, to have been questioned. Ah, how much a mother learns from her child! The constant protection of a helpless being forces us to so strict an alliance with virtue, that a woman never shows to full advantage except as a mother. Then alone can her character expand in the fulfillment of all life's duties and the enjoyment of all its pleasures. A woman who is not a mother is maimed and incomplete. Hasten then, my sweetest, to fulfill your mission. Your present happiness will then be multiplied by the wealth of my delights. 23rd. I had to tear myself from you because your godson was crying. I can hear his cry from the bottom of the garden, but I would not let this go without a word of farewell. I have just been reading over what I have said, and am horrified to see how vulgar are the feelings expressed. What I feel, every mother, alas, since the beginning must have felt, I suppose, in the same way, and put into the same words. You will laugh at me, as we do at the naive father who dilates on the beauty and cleverness of his, of course, quite exceptional offspring. But the refrain of my letter, darling, is this, and I repeat it. I am as happy now as I used to be miserable. This Grange, and is it not going to be an estate, a family property, has become my land of promise. The desert is past and over. 1,000 loves, darling pet. Write to me, for now I can read without a tear the tale of your happy love. Farewell. End of letter 31.
Is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 32. Madame de Macomber to Madame de Lestrade. March, 1826. Do you know, dear, that it is more than 3 months since I have written to you or heard from you? I am the more guilty of the two, for I did not reply to your last, but you don't stand on punctilio, surely. Macomber and I have taken your silence for consent as regards the baby-wreathed luncheon service, and the little cherubs are starting this morning for Marseille. It took 6 months to carry out the design, and so when Philippe asked me to come and see the service before it was packed, I suddenly waked up to the fact that we had not interchanged a word since the letter of yours which gave me an insight into a mother's heart. My sweet, it is this terrible Paris, there's my excuse. What, pray, is yours? Oh, what a whirlpool is society! Didn't I tell you once that in Paris one must be as the Parisians? Society there drives out all sentiment, it lays an embargo on your time, and unless you are very careful, soon eats away your heart altogether. What an amazing masterpiece is the character of Célimène in Molière's Les Misanthropes! She is the society woman, not only of Louis XIV's time, but of our own, and of all time. Where should I be but for my breastplate, the love I bear Philippe? This very morning I told him, as the outcome of these reflections, that he was my salvation. If my evenings are a continuous round of parties, balls, concerts, and theatres, at night my heart expands again, and is healed of the wounds received in the world by the delights of the passionate love which await my return. I dine at home only when we have friends, so called, with us, and spend the afternoon there only on my day, for I have a day now, Wednesday, for receiving. I have entered the lists with Mesdames d'Espard and de Maufrigneuse, and with the old Duchesse de Lenoncourt, and my house has the reputation of being a very lively one. I allowed myself to become the fashion, because I saw how much pleasure my success gave Philippe. My mornings are his. From 4 in the afternoon till 2 in the morning I belong to Paris. Macomber makes an admirable host, witty and dignified, perfect in courtesy, and with an air of real distinction. No woman could help loving such a husband, even if she had chosen him without consulting her heart. My father and mother have left for Madrid. Louis XVIII being out of the way, the Duchess had no difficulty in obtaining from our good-natured Charles X the appointment of her fascinating poet, so he is carried off in the capacity of attaché. My brother, the Duc de Rhetore, deigns to recognize me as a person of mark. As for my younger brother, the Comte de Chaulieu, this buckram warrior owes me everlasting gratitude. Before my father left, he spent my fortune in acquiring for the Count an estate of 40,000 francs a year, entailed on the title, and his marriage with Mademoiselle de Mortsauf, an heiress from Touraine, is definitely arranged. The King, in order to preserve the name and titles of the de Lenoncourt and de Givry families from extinction, is to confer these, together with the armorial bearings, by patent on my brother. Certainly it would never have done to allow these two fine names and their splendid motto, Faciem semper monstramus, to perish. Mademoiselle de Mortsauf, who is granddaughter and sole heiress of the Duc de Lenoncourt Givry, will, it is said, inherit altogether more than 100,000 livres a year. The only stipulation my father has made is that the de Chaulieu arms should appear in the centre of the de Lenoncourt escutcheon. Thus my brother will be Duc de Lenoncourt. The young de Mortsauf, to whom everything would otherwise go, is in the last stage of consumption. His death is looked for every day. The marriage will take place next winter, when the family are out of mourning. I am told that I shall have a charming sister-in-law in Mademoiselle de Mortsauf. So you see that my father's reasoning is justified. The outcome of it all has won me many compliments, and my marriage is explained to everybody's satisfaction. To complete our success, the Prince de Talleyrand, out of affection for my grandmother, is showing himself a warm friend to Macomber. Society, which began by criticizing me, has now passed to cordial admiration. In short, I now reign a queen where barely 2 years ago I was an insignificant item. Macomber finds himself the object of universal envy as the husband of the most charming woman in Paris. At least a score of women, as you know, are always in that proud position. Men murmur sweet things in my ear, or content themselves with greedy glances. This chorus of longing and admiration is so soothing to one's vanity that I confess I begin to understand the unconscionable price women are ready to pay for such frail and precarious privileges. A triumph of this kind is like strong wine to vanity, self-love, and all the self-regarding feelings. To pose perpetually as a divinity is a draught so potent in its intoxicating effects that I am no longer surprised to see women grow selfish, callous, and frivolous in the heart of this adoration. The fumes of society mount to the head. You lavish the wealth of your soul and spirit, the treasures of your time, the noblest efforts of your will, upon a crowd of people who repay you in smiles and jealousy. The false coin of their pretty speeches, compliments, and flattery is the only return they give for the solid gold of your courage and sacrifices. And all the thought that must go to keep up without flagging the standard of beauty, dress, sparkling talk, and general affability. You are perfectly aware how much it costs, and that the whole thing is a fraud, but you cannot keep out of the vortex. Ah, my sweetheart, how one craves for a real friend! How precious to me are the love and devotion of Felipe, and how my heart goes out to you! Joyfully indeed are we preparing for our move to Chantepleurs, where we can rest from the comedy of the Rue de Bac and of the Paris drawing-rooms. Having just read your letter again, I feel that I cannot better describe this demoniac paradise than by saying that no woman of fashion in Paris can possibly be a good mother. Good-bye, then, for a short time, dear one. We shall stay at Chantepleurs only a week at most, and shall be with you about May 10th. So we are actually to meet again after more than 2 years. What changes since then! Here we are, both matrons, both in our promised land, I of love, you of motherhood. If I have not written, my sweetest, it is not because I have forgotten you. And what of the monkey godson? Is he still pretty and a credit to me? He must be more than 9 months old now. I should dearly like to be present when he makes his first steps upon this earth, but Macomber tells me that even precocious infants hardly walk at 10 months. We shall have some good gossips there, and cut pinafores, as the Blois folk say. I shall see whether a child, as the saying goes, spoils the pattern. P.S. If you deign to reply from your maternal heights, address to Chantepleurs. I am just off. End of letter 32. Read by Kara Shallenberg, August 28, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, February 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 33. Madame de Lestrade to Madame de Macomber. My child, if ever you become a mother, you will find out that it is impossible to write letters during the first 2 months of your nursing. Mary, my English nurse, and I are both quite knocked up. It is true, I had not told you that I was determined to do everything myself. Before the event I had with my own fingers sewn the baby clothes and embroidered and edged with lace the little caps. I am a slave, my pet, a slave day and night. To begin with, Master Armand Louis takes his meals when it pleases him, and that is always. Then he has often to be changed, washed, and dressed. His mother is so fond of watching him sleep, of singing songs to him, of walking him about in her arms on a fine day, that she has little time left to attend to herself. In short, what society has been to you, my child, our child has been to me. I cannot tell you how full and rich my life has become, and I long for your coming that you may see for yourself. The only thing is, I am afraid he will be soon teething. and that you will find a peevish, crying baby. So far he has not cried much, for I am always at hand. Babies only cry when their wants are not understood, and I am constantly on the lookout for his. Oh, my sweet, my heart has opened up so wide, while you allow yours to shrink and shrivel at the bidding of society. I look for your coming with all a hermit's longing. I want so much to know what you think of Lestrade, just as you no doubt are curious for my opinion of Macomber. Write to me from your last resting place. The gentlemen want to go out and meet our distinguished guests. Come, Queen of Paris, come to our humble grange, where love at least will greet you. End of letter 33.
Of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 34. Madame de Macomber to the Vicomtesse de Lestrade, April 1826. The name on this address will tell you, dear, that my petition has been granted. Your father-in-law is now Comte de Lestrade. I would not leave Paris till I had obtained the gratification of your wishes, and am writing in the presence of the Keeper of the Seals, who has come to tell me that the patent is signed. Good-bye for a short time. End of letter 34. LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 35. The Same to the Same. Marseille, July. I am ashamed to think how my sudden flight will have taken you by surprise. But since I am above all honest, and since I love you not one bit the less, I shall tell you the truth in 4 words. I am horribly jealous. Philippe's eyes were too often on you. You used to have little talks together at the foot of your rock, which were a torture to me, and I was fast becoming irritable and unlike myself. Your truly Spanish beauty could not fail to recall to him his native land, and along with it Marie Heredia, and I can be jealous of the past too. Your magnificent black hair, your lovely dark eyes, your brow, where the peaceful joy of motherhood stands out radiant against the shadows which tell of past suffering, the freshness of your southern skin, far fairer than that of a blonde like me, the splendid lines of your figure, the breasts on which my godson hangs, peeping through the lace like some luscious fruit. All this stabbed me in the eyes and in the heart. In vain did I stick cornflowers in my curls, in vain set off with cherry-colored ribbons the tameness of my pale locks. Everything looked washed out when Renee appeared, a Renee so unlike the one I expected to find in your oasis. Then Philippe made too much of the child, whom I found myself beginning to hate. Yes, I confess it, that exuberance of life which fills your house, making it gay with shouts and laughter, I wanted it for myself. I read a regret in Macomber's eyes, and, unknown to him, I cried over it 2 whole nights. I was miserable in your house. You are too beautiful as a woman, too triumphant as a mother, for me to endure your company. Ah, you complained of your lot. Hypocrite, what would you have? Lestrade is most presentable. He talks well, he has fine eyes, and his black hair, dashed with white, is very becoming. His southern manners, too, have something attractive about them. As far as I can make out, he will, sooner or later, be elected deputy for the Bouches du Rhône. In the Chamber he is sure to come to the front, for you can always count on me to promote your interests. The sufferings of his exile have given him that calm and dignified air which goes half-way, in my opinion, to make a politician. For the whole art of politics, dear, seems to me to consist in looking serious. At this rate, Macomber, as I told him, ought certainly to have a high position in the state. And so, having completely satisfied myself of your happiness, I fly off contented to my dear Chantepleurs, where Philippe must really achieve his aspirations. I have made up my mind not to receive you there without a fine baby at my breast to match yours. Oh, I know very well I deserve all the epithets you can hurl at me. I am a fool, a wretch, an idiot. Alas, that is just what jealousy means. I am not vexed with you, but I was miserable, and you will forgive me for escaping from my misery. 2 days more, and I should have made an exhibition of myself. Yes, there would have been an outbreak of vulgarity. But in spite of the rage gnawing at my heart, I am glad to have come, glad to have seen you in the pride of your beautiful motherhood, my friend still, as I remain yours in all the absorption of my love. Why, even here at Marseilles, only a step from your door, I begin to feel proud of you, and of the splendid mother that you will make. How well you judged your vocation! You seem to me born for the part of mother rather than of lover, exactly as the reverse is true of me. There are women capable of neither, hard-favored or silly women. A good mother and a passionately loving wife have this in common, that they both need intelligence and discretion ever at hand, and an unfailing command of every womanly art and grace. Oh, I watched you well. Need I add, sly puss, that I admired you too? Your children will be happy, but not spoilt, with your tenderness lapping them round, and the clear light of your reason playing softly on them. Tell Louis the truth about my going away, but find some decent excuse for your father-in-law, who seems to act as steward for the establishment, and be careful to do the same for your family, a true Provençal version of the Harlowe family. Philippe does not know why I left, and he will never know. If he asks, I shall contrive to find some colorable pretext, probably that you were jealous of me. Forgive me this little conventional fib. Good-bye. I write in haste, as I want you to get this at lunch-time, and the postilion who has undertaken to convey it to you is here, refreshing himself while he waits. Many kisses to my dear little godson. Be sure you come to Chantepleurs in October. I shall be alone there all the time that Mccomber is away in Sardinia, where he is designing great improvements in his estate. At least that is his plan for the moment, and his pet vanity consists in having a plan. Then he feels that he has a will of his own, and this makes him very uneasy when he unfolds it to me. Good-bye. End of letter 35. Read on August 30th, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, February 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 36. The Vicomtesse de Lestrade to the Baron de Macomber. Dear, no words can express the astonishment of all our party when, at luncheon, we were told that you had both gone, and, above all, when the postilion who took you to Marseilles handed me your mad letter. Why, naughty child! It was of your happiness and nothing else that made the theme of those talks below the rock, on the Louise seat, and you had not the faintest justification for objecting to them. Ingrata! My sentence on you is that you return here at my first summons. In that horrid letter, scribbled on the inn paper, you did not tell me what would be your next stopping place, so I must address this to Chantepleurs. Listen to me, dear sister of my heart. Know first that my mind is set on your happiness. Your husband, dear Louise, commands respect, not only by his natural gravity and dignified expression, but also because he somehow impresses one with the splendid power revealed in his piquant plainness, and in the fire of his velvet eyes, and you will understand that it was some little time before I could meet him on those easy terms which are almost necessary for intimate conversation. Further, this man has been Prime Minister, and he idolizes you, whence it follows that he must be a profound dissembler. To fish up secrets, therefore, from the rocky caverns of this diplomatic soul is a work demanding a skilful hand no less than a ready brain. Nevertheless, I succeeded at last, without rousing my victim's suspicions, in discovering many things of which you, my pet, have no conception. You know that between us two, my part is rather that of reason, yours of imagination. I personify sober duty, you reckless love. It has pleased fate to continue in our lives this contrast in character which was imperceptible to all except ourselves. I am a simple country viscountess, very ambitious, and making it her task to lead her family on the road to prosperity. On the other hand, Macomber, late Duc de Soria, has a name in the world, and you, a duchess by right, reign in Paris, where reigning is no easy matter even for kings. You have a considerable fortune, which will be doubled if Macomber carries out his project for developing the great estates in Sardinia, the resources of which are a matter of common talk at Marseilles. Deny, if you can, that if either has the right to be jealous, it is not you. But, thank God, we have both hearts generous enough to place our friendship beyond reach of such vulgar pettiness. I know you, dear. I know that ere now you are ashamed of having fled. But don't suppose that your flight will save you from a single word of discourse which I had prepared for your benefit to-day beneath the rock. Read carefully, then, I beg of you, what I say, for it concerns you even more closely than Macomber, though he also enters largely into my sermon. Firstly, my dear, you do not love him. Before 2 years are over, you will be sick of adoration. You will never look on Philippe as a husband. To you he will be always the lover whom you can play with, for that is how all women treat their lovers. You do not look up to him, or reverence or worship him as a woman should the god of her idolatry. You see, I have made a study of love, my sweet, and more than once have I taken soundings in the depth of my own heart. Now, as the result of a careful diagnosis of your case, I can say with confidence this is not love. Yes, dear Queen of Paris, you cannot escape the destiny of all queens. The day will come when you long to be treated as a light o' love, to be mastered and swept off your feet by a strong man, one who will not prostrate himself in adoration before you, but will seize your arm roughly in a fit of jealousy. Macomber loves you too fondly ever to be able to resist you or to find a fault with you. A single glance from you, a single coaxing word, would melt his sternest resolution. Sooner or later you will learn to scorn this excessive devotion. He spoils you, alas, just as I used to spoil you at the convent, for you are a most bewitching woman, and there is no escaping your siren-like charms. Worse than all that, you are candid, and it often happens that our happiness depends on certain social hypocrisies to which you will never stoop. For instance, society will not tolerate a frank display of the wife's power over her husband. The convention is that a man must no more show himself the lover of his wife, however passionately he adores her, than a married woman may play the part of a mistress. This rule you both disregard. In the first place, my child, from what you have yourself told me, it is clear that the one unpardonable sin in society is to be happy. If happiness exists, no one must know of it. But this is a small point. What seems to me important is that the perfect equality which reigns between lovers ought never to appear in the case of husband and wife, under pain of undermining the whole fabric of society and entailing terrible disasters. If it is painful to see a man whom nature has made a nonentity, how much worse is the spectacle of a man of parts brought to that position. Before very long you will have reduced Macomber to the mere shadow of a man. He will cease to have a will and character of his own, and become mere clay in your hands. You will have so completely molded him to your likeness that your household will consist of only one person instead of two, and that one necessarily imperfect. You will regret it bitterly, but when at last you deign to open your eyes, the evil will be past cure. Do what we will, women do not, and never will, possess the qualities which are characteristic of men, and these qualities are absolutely indispensable to family life. Already Macomber, blinded though he is, has a dim foreshadowing of this future. He feels himself less a man through his love. His visit to Sardinia is a proof to me that he hopes by this temporary separation to succeed in recovering his old self. You never scrupled to use the power which his love has placed in your hand. Your position of vantage may be read in a gesture, a look, a tone. Oh, darling, how truly are you the mad wanton your mother called you! You do not question, I fancy, that I am greatly Louis' superior. Well, I would ask you, have you ever heard me contradict him? Am I not always, in the presence of others, the wife who respects in him the authority of the family? Hypocrisy, you will say. Well, listen to me. It is true that if I want to give him any advice which I think may be of use to him, I wait for the quiet and seclusion of our bedroom to explain what I think and wish. But I assure you, sweetheart, that even there I never arrogate to myself the place of mentor. If I did not remain in private the same submissive wife that I appeared to others, he would lose confidence in himself. Dear, the good we do to others is spoilt unless we efface ourselves so completely that those we help have no sense of inferiority. There is a wonderful sweetness in these hidden sacrifices, and what a triumph for me in your unsuspecting praises of Louis! There can be no doubt also that the happiness, the comfort, the hope of the last 2 years have restored what misfortune, hardship, solitude, and despondency has robbed him of. This, then, is the sum total of my observations. At the present moment you love in Philippe, not your husband, but yourself. There is truth in your father's words. Concealed by the spring flowers of your passion lies all the great lady's selfishness. Ah, my child, how I must love you to speak such bitter truths! Let me tell you, if you will promise never to breathe a word of this to the Baron, the end of our talk. We had been singing your praises in every key, for he soon discovered that I loved you like a fondly cherished sister, and having insensibly brought him to a confidential mood, I ventured to say, Louise has never yet had to struggle with life. She has been the spoilt child of fortune, and she might yet have to pay for this were you not there to act the part of her father as well as lover. Ah, but is it possible? He broke off abruptly, like a man who sees himself on the edge of a precipice. But the exclamation was enough for me. No doubt, if you had stayed, he would have spoken more freely later. My sweet, think of the day awaiting you when your husband's strength will be exhausted, when pleasure will have turned to satiety, and he sees himself, I will not say degraded, but shorn of his proper dignity before you. The stings of conscience will then waken a sort of remorse in him, all the more painful for you because you will feel yourself responsible, and you will end by despising the man whom you have not accustomed yourself to respect. Remember, too, that scorn with a woman is only the earliest phase of hatred. You are too noble and generous, I know, ever to forget the sacrifices which Philippe has made for you. But what further sacrifices will be left for him to make when he has, so to speak, served up himself at the first banquet? Woe to the man, as to the woman, who has left no desire unsatisfied. All is over then. To our shame or our glory, the point is too nice for me to decide. It is of love alone that women are insatiable. Oh, Louise, change yet while there is time. If you would only adopt the same course with Macomber that I have done with Lestrade, you might rouse the sleeping lion in your husband, who is made of the stuff of heroes. One might almost say that you grudge him his greatness. Would you feel no pride in using your power for other ends than your own gratification, in awaking the genius of a gifted man, as I in raising to a higher level one of merely common parts? Had you remained with us, I should still have written this letter, for in talking you might have cut me short, or got the better of me with your sharp tongue. But I know that you will read this thoughtfully and weigh my warnings. Dear heart, you have everything in life to make you happy. Do not spoil your chances. Return to Paris, I entreat you, as soon as Macomber comes back. The engrossing claims of society, of which I complained, are necessary for both of you. Otherwise you would spend your life in mutual self-absorption. A married woman ought not to be too lavish of herself. The mother of a family, who never gives her household an opportunity of missing her, runs the risk of palling on them. If I have several children, as I trust for my own sake I may, I assure you I shall make a point of reserving to myself certain hours which shall be held sacred. Even to one's children, one's presence should not be a matter of daily bread. Farewell, my dear jealous soul. Do you know that many women would be highly flattered at having roused this passing pang in you? Alas, I can only mourn, for what is not mother in me is your dear friend. 1,000 loves. Make what excuses you will for leaving. If you are not sure of Macomber, I am of Louis. End of letter 36.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 37. The Baronne de Mccomber to the Vicomtesse de Lestrade. Genoa. My beloved beauty, I was bitten with the fancy to see something of Italy, and I am delighted at having carried off Mccomber, whose plans in regard to Sardinia are postponed. This country is simply ravishing. The churches, above all the chapels, have a seductive, bewitching air, which must make every female Protestant yearn after Catholicism. Macomber has been received with acclamation, and they are all delighted to have made an Italian of so distinguished a man. Philippe could have the Sardinian embassy at Paris if I cared about it, for I am made much of at court. If you write, address your letters to Florence. I have not time now to go into any details, but I will tell you the story of our travels whenever you come to Paris. We only remain here a week, and then go on to Florence, taking Leghorn on the way. We shall stay a month in Tuscany and a month at Naples, so as to reach Rome in November. Thence we return home by Venice, where we shall spend the first fortnight of December and arrive in Paris, via Milan and Turin, for January. Our journey is a perfect honeymoon. The sight of new places gives fresh life to our passion. Macomber did not know Italy at all, and we have begun with that splendid Cornice road, which might be the work of fairy architects. Good-bye, darling. Don't be angry if I don't write. It is impossible to get a minute to oneself in traveling. My whole time is taken up with seeing, admiring, and realizing my impressions. But not a word to you of these till memory has given them their proper atmosphere. End of letter 37. Read on August 30th, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, February 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 38. The Vicomtesse de Lestrade to the Baron de Macomber. September. My dear, there is lying for you at Chantepleurs a full reply to the letter you wrote me from Marseille. This honeymoon journey, so far from diminishing the fears I there expressed, makes me beg of you to get my letters sent on from Nivernais. The government, it is said, are resolved on dissolution. This is unlucky for the Crown, since the last session of this loyal Parliament would have been devoted to the passing of laws essential to the consolidation of its power. And it is not less so for us, as Louis will not be 40 till the end of 1827. Fortunately, however, my father has agreed to stand, and he will resign his seat when the right moment arrives. Your godson has found out how to walk without his godmother's help. He is altogether delicious, and begins to make the prettiest little signs to me, which brings home to one that here is really a thinking being, not a mere animal or sucking machine. His smiles are full of meaning. I have been so successful in my profession of nurse that I shall wean Armand in December. A year at the breast is quite enough. Children who are suckled longer are said to grow stupid, and I am all for popular sayings. You must make a tremendous sensation in Italy, my fair one with the golden locks. 1,000 loves. End of letter 38.
Recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 39. The Baron de Macomber to the Vicomtesse de Lestrade. Your atrocious letter has reached me here, the steward having forwarded it by my orders. Oh, Renee! But I will spare you the outburst of my wounded feelings, and simply tell you the effect your letter produced. We had just returned from a delightful reception given in our honour by the ambassador, where I appeared in all my glory, and Macomber was completely carried away in a frenzy of love which I could not describe. Then I read him your horrible answer to my letter, and I read it sobbing, at the risk of making a fright of myself. My dear Arab fell at my feet, declaring that you raved. Then he carried me off to the balcony of the palace where we are staying, from which we have a view over part of the city. There he spoke to me words worthy of the magnificent moonlight scene which lay stretched before us. We both speak Italian now, and his love, told in that voluptuous tongue, so admirably adapted to the expression of passion, sounded in my ears like the most exquisite poetry. He swore that, even if you were right in your predictions, he would not exchange for a lifetime a single one of our blessed nights or charming mornings. At this reckoning he has already lived 1,000 years. He is content to have me for his mistress, and would claim no other title than that of lover. So proud and pleased is he to see himself every day the chosen of my heart, that were heaven to offer him the alternative between living as you would have us to for another 30 years with 5 children, and 5 years spent amid the dear roses of our love, he would not hesitate. He would take my love, such as it is, and death. While he was whispering this in my ear, his arm round me, my head resting on his shoulder, the cries of a bat, surprised by an owl, disturbed us. This death cry struck me with such terror that Philippe carried me half fainting to my bed. But don't be alarmed. Though this augury of evil still resounds in my soul, I am quite myself this morning. As soon as I was up, I went to Philippe, and, kneeling before him, my eyes fixed on his hands clasped in mine, I said to him, "My love, I am a child, and Renee may be right after all. It may be only your love that I love in you, but at least I can assure you that this is the one feeling of my heart, and that I love you as it is given me to love. But if there be aught in me, in my lightest thought or deed, which jars on your wishes or conception of me, I implore you to tell me, to say what it is. It will be a joy to me to hear you and to take your eyes as the guiding stars of my life. Renee has frightened me, for she is a true friend." Macomber could not find voice to reply. Tears choked him. "I can thank you now, Renee. But for your letter I should not have known the depths of love in my noble kingly Macomber. Rome is the city of love. It is there that passion should celebrate its feast, with art and religion as confederates. At Venice we shall find the Duke and Duchess de Soria. If you write, address now to Paris, for we shall leave Rome in 3 days. The ambassadors was a farewell party. P.S. Dear silly child, your letter only shows that you knew nothing of love, except theoretically. Learn then that love is a quickening force which may produce fruits so diverse that no theory can embrace or coordinate them. A word this for my little professor, with her armor of stays. End of letter 39. Read on August 30th, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, February 2007. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 40. Vicomtesse de Lestrade to the Baron de Macomber, January 1827. My father has been elected to the Chamber. My father-in-law is dead, and I am on the point of my second confinement. These are the chief events marking the end of the year for us. I mention them at once, lest the sight of a black seal should frighten you. My dear, your letter from Rome made my flesh creep. You are nothing but a pair of children. Philippe is either a dissembling diplomat, or else his love for you is the love a man might have for a courtesan, on whom he squanders his all, knowing all the time that she is false to him. Enough of this. You say I rave, so I had better hold my tongue. Only this would I say: from the comparison of our two very different destinies, I draw this harsh moral: love not if you would be loved. My dear, when Louis was elected to the Provincial Council, he received the Cross of the Legion of Honor. That is now nearly 3 years ago, and as my father, whom you will no doubt see in Paris during the course of the season, has asked the rank of officer of the Legion for his son-in-law, I want to know if you will do me the kindness to take in hand the bigwig, whoever he may be, to whom this patronage belongs, and to keep an eye upon the little affair. But, whatever you do, don't get entangled in the concerns of my honored father. The Comte de Maucombe is fishing for the title of Marquis for himself. But keep your good services for me, please. When Louis is a deputy, next winter that is, we shall come to Paris, and then we will move heaven and earth to get some government appointment for him, so that we may be able to save our income by living on his salary. My father sits between the centre and the right. A title will content him. Our family was distinguished even in the days of King Renee, and Charles X will hardly say no to a Mccomber. But what I fear is that my father may take it into his head to ask some favour for my younger brother. Now, if the marquisate is dangled out of his reach, he will have no thoughts to spare from himself. January 15th. Ah, Louise, I have been in hell. If I can bear to tell you of my anguish, it is because you are another self. Even so, I don't know whether I shall ever be able to live again in thought those 5 ghastly days. The mere word convulsions makes my very heart sick. 5 days! To me they were 5 centuries of torture. A mother who has not been through this martyrdom does not know what suffering is. So frenzied was I that I even envied you who never had a child. The evening before that terrible day the weather was close, almost hot, and I thought my little Armand was affected by it. Generally so sweet and caressing, he was peevish, cried for nothing, wanted to play, and then broke his toys. Perhaps this sort of fractiousness is the usual sign of approaching illness with children. While I was wondering about it, I noticed Armand's cheeks flush, but this I set down to teething, for he is cutting 4 large teeth at once. So I put him to bed beside me, and kept constantly waking through the night. He was a little feverish, but not enough to make me uneasy, my mind being still full of the teething. Toward morning he cried "Mamma!" and asked by signs for something to drink. But the cry was spasmodic, and there were convulsive twitchings in the limbs, which turned me to ice. I jumped out of bed to fetch him a drink. Imagine my horror when, on my handing him the cup, he remained motionless, only repeating "Mamma!" in that strange, unfamiliar voice, which was indeed by this time hardly a voice at all. I took his hand, but it did not respond to my pressure. It was quite stiff. I put the cup to his lips. The poor little fellow gulped down 3 or 4 mouthfuls in a convulsive manner that was terrible to see, and the water made a strange sound in his throat. He clung to me desperately, and I saw his eyes roll, as though some hidden force within were pulling at them, till only the whites were visible. His limbs were turning rigid. I screamed aloud, and Louis came. "A doctor, quick! He is dying!" I cried. Louis vanished, and my poor Armand again gasped, "Mamma! Mamma!" The next moment he lost all consciousness of his mother's existence. The pretty veins on his forehead swelled, and the convulsions began. For a whole hour before the doctors came, I held in my arms that merry baby, all lilies and roses, the blossom of my life, my pride and my joy, lifeless as a piece of wood. And his eyes, I cannot think of them without horror. My pretty Armand was a mere mummy, black, shriveled, misshapen. A doctor, 2 doctors brought from Marseille by Louis, hovered about like birds of ill omen. It made me shudder to look at them. One spoke of brain fever, the other saw nothing but an ordinary case of convulsions in infancy. Our own country doctor seemed to me to have the most sense, for he offered no opinion. "It's teething," said the second doctor. "Fever," said the first. Finally it was agreed to put leeches on his neck and ice on his head. It seemed to me like death. To look on, to see a corpse all purple or black, and not a cry, not a movement from this creature but now so full of life and sound, it was horrible. At one moment I lost my head, and gave a sort of hysterical laugh, as I saw the pretty neck which I used to devour with kisses, with the leeches feeding on it, and his darling head in a cap of ice. My dear, we had to cut those lovely curls, of which we were so proud, and with which you used to play, in order to make room for the ice. The convulsions returned every 10 minutes with the regularity of labor pains, and then the poor baby writhed and twisted, now white, now violet. His supple limbs clattered like wood as they struck. And this unconscious flesh was the being who smiled and prattled, and used to say "Mamma!" at the thought. A storm of agony swept tumultuously over my soul, like the sea tossing in a hurricane. It seemed as though every tie which binds a child to its mother's heart was strained to rending. My mother, who might have given me help, advice, or comfort, was in Paris. Mothers, it is my belief, know more than doctors do about convulsions. After 4 days and 4 nights of suspense and fear, which almost killed me, the doctors were unanimous in advising the application of a horrid ointment, which would produce open sores. Sores on my Armand, who only 5 days before was playing about and laughing, and trying to say godmother. I would not have it done, preferring to trust in nature. Louis, who believes in doctors, scolded me. A man remains the same through everything, but there are moments when this terrible disease takes the likeness of death, and in one of these it seemed borne in upon me that this hateful remedy was the salvation of Armand. Louise, the skin was so dry, so rough and parched, that the ointment would not act. Then I broke into weeping, and my tears fell so long and so fast that the bedside was wet through, and the doctors were at dinner. Seeing myself alone with the child, I stripped him of all medical appliances, and seizing him like a madwoman, pressed him to my bosom, laying my forehead against his, and beseeching God to grant him the life which I was striving to pass into his veins from mine. For some minutes I held him thus, longing to die with him, so that neither life nor death might part us. Dear, I felt the limbs relaxing, the writhings ceased, the child stirred, and the ghastly corpse-like tints faded away. I screamed, just as I did when he was taken ill. The doctors hurried up, and I pointed to Armand. "He is saved!" exclaimed the oldest of them. What music in those words! The gates of heaven opened. And in fact, 2 hours later, Armand came back to life, but I was utterly crushed, and it was only the healing power of joy which saved me from a serious illness. My God, by what tortures do you bind a mother to her child? To fasten him to our heart, need the nails be driven into the very quick? Was I not mother enough before? I, who wept tears of joy over his broken syllables and tottering steps, who spent hours together planning how best to perform my duty and fit myself for the sweet post of mother? Why these horrors, these ghastly scenes, for a mother who already idolized her child? As I write, our little Armand is playing, shouting, laughing. What can be the cause of this terrible disease with children? Vainly do I try to puzzle it out, remembering that I am again with child. Is it teething? Is it some peculiar process in the brain? Is there something wrong with the nervous system of children who are subject to convulsions? All these thoughts disquiet me, in view alike of the present and the future. Our country doctor holds to the theory of nervous trouble produced by teething. I would give every tooth in my head to see little Armand's all through. The sight of one of those little pearls peeping out of the swollen gum brings a cold sweat over me now. The heroism with which the little angel bore his sufferings proves to me that he will be his mother's son. A look from him goes to my very heart. Medical science can give no satisfactory explanation as to the origin of this sort of tetanus, which passes off as rapidly as it comes on, and can apparently be neither guarded against nor cured. One thing alone, as I said before, is certain, that it is hell for a mother to see her child in convulsions. How passionately do I clasp him to my heart! I would walk for ever with him in my arms. To have suffered all this only 6 weeks before my confinement made it much worse. I feared for the coming child. Farewell, my dear beloved. Don't wish for a child. There is the sum and substance of my letter. End of letter 40.